entitled Parents and the Autistic Brother. I am not the oop. That is you, Restless Mind 95, and was posted in r. entitled Parents. P.S. I am doing this on my 15-minute break from work. So I am hoping I do this right, since I am in a rush. He doesn't know any better. Face with rolling eyes. https www.reddit.com/r/entitledparents/comments/wpqhsj/he doesn't know any better. My parents, dad is 54 and mom is 52, are angry with me for not ignoring my older brothers. 32. Predatory behavior. Just a little context about my older brother and the situation at hand. My brother is 32 years old. He's never had a job. He dropped out of community college after 2 semesters for never doing his assignments. He's lived with my parents his entire life. He sleeps all day and stays up all night playing video games and watching porn. Both my brother and I, 27M, are diagnosed autistic and present our symptoms similarly, but I've been working since I was 17. Got my driver's license at 17. Bought my first car at 24 and started college in 2019. My parents constantly use my brother's autism as an excuse for his appalling behavior even though we're both on the spectrum. In November of 2020 I moved back in with my parents because I left an abusive relationship and had chronic health issues. I met my current girlfriend, 23F, in mid-2021, and in early 2022 she had some extenuating circumstances where my family agreed to let her live with us. My brother was immediately pleased with this development, but just as quickly behaved inappropriately. It started off with him creepily staring anytime my GF and I kissed. Progressed to him following my GF into the bathroom anytime he saw her go in there for a shower. Until he figured out she always locked the door because of him. And the straw that broke the camel's back was him trying to come into our bedroom uninvited and without knocking at 3 in the morning while we slept. Every time he behaved inappropriately we mentioned it to my parents. But all that really happened were excuses made for him, because he's autistic, and brief conversation with him about not doing those things again, and then him still doing whatever he wanted. Anyway, after the bedroom incident they kicked my GF out, making her homeless for a brief period of time because she had a PTSD panic attack since my brother made her feel unsafe. As a result of this my GF and I got an apartment together and I moved out because I didn't want to be in the same house as my brother. I was upset with the way my GF was treated, and I wasn't willing to break up with her, which my parents wanted me to do. I had a calm conversation with my parents explaining why I was moving out, where I explained it's their house so they are more than entitled to make rules concerning their own home. However, I was not going to continue living somewhere my GF wasn't welcome and where my brother's predatory behavior was condoned. At first they told me they love me. They're sorry they ever made me feel that way. They want me to keep a key to house because I'm always welcome over. And that if I ever needed to move back in I could. Several days later I went over to pick up some more of my things only to find that my parents had changed the locks on the door. Later that same week they tell me they're angry with me for being ungrateful, saying I hate them, and calling them bad parents, none of which I ever said. They went on to tell me that they didn't want to speak to me for a week because they were upset, needed time to process, and because they thought I needed to feel what it was like to be cut out of the family. I respected their wishes, and later my parents agreed to family therapy, which they quickly backed out of because they were only willing to do it over a 3-way video call. And my therapist website wasn't able to do that. I'm not sure why, but my therapist said it wasn't doable. At which point I told my parents I would be willing to attend family therapy with a therapist of their choice who could do the 3-way video call. But that had yet to happen. That same Sunday my parents invited me over for dinner, which I thought went well, only to find they would continue to dodge me calls and leave my texts on read after that night. They eventually contacted me and told me to stop using their house as storage and pick up my things, despite requesting that I stay away for a week. My GF and I go over to pick up the rest of our stuff, which was awkward but quick. Later that day I got a text from my mom wishing me luck at college. But my parents still aren't willing to talk about the issues that led to me moving out, or even to come over to see our new apartment after being invited over, because despite the circumstances I still love them and want a relationship with them, since this type of behavior is highly uncharacteristic of them. Understandably, my GF isn't fond of them, but told me she doesn't mind me inviting my parents over because it's important to her that I have a relationship with my parents for the sake of my mental well-being. Has anyone else ever dealt with a situation similar to this? If so, how did you deal with it? Update number 1. https www.reddit.com/r/entitledparents/comments/ws7qr3/he doesn't know any better. Follow up. I've been working through some things in therapy and I had a bit of an epiphany. For years, I thought my parents were double me a favor by letting me live with, but things started to unravel. The more I thought about it and talked to my therapist. I'm currently 27, but I didn't start living on my own until I was 22 and always thought I was a failure or a late bloomer. But then I remembered I tried moving out on my own when I was 20. I found a friend was willing to be my roommate at the time, and we were apartment hunting together. I eventually told my parents I wanted to move out, and my mom told me they wouldn't be able to afford the rent for their apartment if I wasn't there to pitch in, and my dad asked me, "How are you gonna find a roommate? You can't even find someone to hang out with you on your birthday." When I lived with them, I didn't give them all my money from work. But I could never save more than $500 because they would inevitably fall behind on some bill and I would have to help, and a lot of times I didn't have the money to help, so it was normal for me to sell my things at a pawn shop to pitch, which was never asked of my older brother. I only had to stop contributing to my parents' finances once we were homeless in 2018 and reconnected with my extended family who let couch surf, and they told my parents they thought it was weird I gave them so much money. When my parents lived in New York and I lived alone in Texas for 2 years, I was actually thriving. With the exception of my abusive ex and chronic health issues. I dropped 120 pounds. I was on the honor roll at my college. I bought a car. I was doing so well. Later, my mother admitted to me she was actually angry and resentful toward me for getting my first job at 17 because the government took away my disability money that she was managing. I feel like that's one reason my older brother is still treated as the golden child. He still gets disability that my mom manages 100% and is fairly obedient to her. It just made me think, wow. Sorry, I'm such a disappointment because I wasn't an obedient little disability check for you, and I wanted a life of my own. I was also sexually abused my into school in first grade by a neighbor's teenage son, and when I asked my mom why she wasn't more protective of me, she said, "I was so concerned with making sure that never happened to your brother that it never occurred to me that it could happen to you." I used to think my parents were very moral and ethical people. But the more therapy I go to, the more I'm noticing patterns. For example, my mom was always doing research on narcissists and claiming that all my grandparents were narcissists, and that's why we went no contact with them for over a decade, which at the time when I was a kid I believed her. But then I realized a classic narcissist tactic is to isolate people from others who can help them. I even remember being a freshman in high school and my mom terrifying me by convincing my grandfather had hired private investigators to stalk us, which, knowing my grandfather now that I'm adult, is something he'd never do. Sorry for the rant, but I needed to get this out somewhere. Update number 2. https www.reddit.com/r/entitledparents/comments/xeo9id/he doesn't know any better. Follow up. A while back I, 27M, shared a post in this group about my older brother's 31 inappropriate and sexually predatory behavior toward my GF, 23, and how my parents were condoning and making excuses for his behavior. The excuse being that he's autistic, so he doesn't know any better, even though both of us are autistic and both of us are considered high functioning and low support needs. Anyway, since that incident, my GF and I have gotten an apartment together and things have been going well. My parents have been very low contact because they're salty I didn't dump my GF and excuse my brother's creepy behavior. During this whole situation, my grandfather has been nothing short of a rock for me. He and my step-grandmother have been offering me advice, helped me get career counseling services, wants to help with my tuition now that I'm back in college, and have offered to buy plane tickets, admission tickets, airplane for both my GF and I to fly cross-country to spend Thanksgiving with them and get the opportunity to introduce my GF to them. He's been very clear that he sides with me on the disagreement with my parents because he doesn't agree with my brother's behavior and has stated the obvious that my parents don't seem to grasp, which is that I'm grown man and can date who I want and live my life as I see fit. I feel really lucky to have him around, but at the same time I'm still incredibly frustrated with my parents. I have a large extended family and I've heard through the grapes that my parents want me to move back with them, but on their terms, and they're going low contact with me to teach me a lesson, and all I can think is what TF kind of delusional fairy tale world globe do they live in where I would abandon a healthy relationship with my GF and having my own place to move back in with them just to be the scapegoat for all of my brother's BS? Remember, I am not OOP. I am marking this concluded because I want to mark it as ongoing. But for some reason it will not let me. And I don't think OOP is done with the situation with their parents. So please don't hate on me for that. Quick editing comment: you've cut the first letter off of each new paragraph somehow. Cold sweat smile. Yikes at them using their kid for disability income and then making him pay them once he started working. And I don't understand them kicking out the girlfriend when brother barged in. Makes zero sense unless OOP neglected to mention that there was a big fight over it afterwards. Whole thing is very bereft of details, honestly. But sounds like OOP thrives away from his parents, so good for him. The constant mood swings of OP's parents shows their words aren't true reflections of how they feel. They'll say, do anything to get OP back under their thumb. Sad if it really is just for disability checks at the end of the day. OP's brother is also a victim despite his awful behavior. He has been enabled his whole life and is now a man-child. 1. Being autistic means that you don't always understand why certain social expectations exist. But it doesn't preclude abiding by them anyways. You just file it under weird human shit to memorize and move forward accordingly. 2. Do you know what having an autistic kid made me realize? That I'm autistic. My mom is autistic. My granddad was autistic. Which is why we're all such difficult weirdos. It has clarified so fucking much. I'm not saying that one or both of OOP's parents are undiagnosed and it wouldn't justify their behavior. But hoo boy, does undiagnosed autism explain all sorts of otherwise deeply hurtful things. Similarish thing happened with my cousin, his girlfriend, and his autistic older brother. My aunt was never super firm with him growing up and failed to realize, despite knowing about this since he was very young, that she would have to put in more effort to make sure he understood certain social situations and interactions properly. Unlike OOP's brother, my older cousin is on the mid to lower end of function of the autism spectrum. She never seemed to know that he had a problem trying to inappropriately touch any of his female cousins while we were all growing up, despite all the other aunts and uncles knowing about it. But it definitely blew up in her face when he tried to pull something with her younger son's girlfriend some months back, and now their whole relationship is strained. Luckily, not nearly as intentionally manipulative or neglectful as OOP's parents. But it'll never not be sad for me to see parents setting their children up for failure, much less outright taking advantage of them like this. OOP's brother is neglected and being used and has no way of even realizing it. Yikes! Oop should stay far away from his parents and brother, because all they care about is Oop's disability checks, and his brothers too, since they basically don't care about Oop or the brother's creepy behavior. Seriously, Oop should cut contact with them, because when the tea hits the fan after the brother does something they can't rug sweep, Oop should be as far away from them as possible, because they are not taking Oop's warning seriously, and give the fact Oop is also autistic and not doing mess up things like his brother, as people will clearly see thought them if they try to use brother's autism as an excuse when he escalates. I hope Oop makes it perfectly clear that he will in no way take responsibility for his brother once his parents pass away. The emojis zany face make the trauma dizzy face a sparkly dizzy. It's always wild to me that decent people like the grandfather can produce scum like the parents. Real nature-nurture conundrum. Wow, is that messed up? They are treating the oldest son like a child versus an adult man behaving very inappropriately towards his brother's GF. I'm so glad they got out before she was assaulted. You just know it would have gotten there. Oop epiphany was so gratifying to read. You hate him having to find out. Admit and accept your parents are shish. I'm so glad his grandparents are such upstanding humans. I'm hoping that Oop and his GF head out there for Thanksgiving and then relocate. Gramps can help them get a hand up and they can all enjoy being a family. Bonus, they can all be far away from the scammers. I do feel for the older brother, his parents refusing to let him find his potential. WTF is he going to do when they die? I'm so happy Oop managed to escape this situation. So glad Oop has a happy ending here. His parents using his brother's autism as a way to excuse his behavior. Eesh. Sounds like they just want to enable him. Since he gets them free money, they want Oop to be dependent on them so they can get more. Reading this was like watching someone open a box of stuffed animals, only to discover it was actually a well full of worms. Yeah, OOP's parents want to isolate him again so they can force him out of college and back on disability. I wonder if the brother's disability check is their only means of support?
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.